This is Unit 8, Video 10, Solving Trig Equations Graphically. And one of the things you're going to want to do is make sure you have a calculator available to you. Now, I know as you're sitting home watching these videos, some of you have one and some of you do not, and that's okay. What you should do is make sure that you write down, there is some space over here, to write down the steps that I'm talking about, and any notes of information that you need to take, you should be writing them down right here on your note sheet so that you are ready for class and using your calculator when you get there. So exercise number 1 says graphically solve the equation 2 cosine x plus 1 equals 0 for all values of x on the interval 0 less or equal to x less than 360 degrees. Sketch and label a graph to justify your answers. So what we're going to do is hop over to a calculator, and you could see I've already brought up my calculator screen. And what you want to do is check your mode. Now if I check right here, it says my angle is in radians. So we're going to go in and make sure that our graph is in the proper mode. So you're going to hit menu once you are in the graph, go down to settings, adjust it so that your graphing angle is in degrees. If you do not change this here, you will not be in degrees and you will be in radians. Now, there are some benefits to being in radians, and that's when your scale is into pi, or the question's in terms of radians. But our question here is in terms of degrees, so we should make sure we're in degrees. It's the number one thing that you need to pay attention to when it comes to a detail, is if you're in radian or degree mode. So I fixed this. And now I'm going to type in my equation. Use the trig button. 2 cosine x outside the parentheses plus 1. Now once I've done this and hit enter, it looks like a flat line. Now if you remember what our picture looks like over here, oops, wrong thing, you see that we want to go from -4 to 4 and 0 to 360. That's telling us what to set our window up on. So hit menu, go to window zoom. Window settings is where we type in exactly what we want. X min, which is the left side, is 0. X max, the right side, is 360. Let's count by 45 degrees. You could count by 90 if you wanted to. Y min, that was -4, and max is 4, and we hit OK. When we look at this, we see that we have one complete cycle of the cosine of x plus 1. And if you remember, we already knew how to do this even without a graphing calculator. You knew that this is 2 cosine of x plus 1. And this means that this is the cosine graph with an amplitude of 2 and a vertical shift of 1. I'm going to pause this for my phone. As I was saying, the amplitude is 2 and the vertical shift is 1. So you already knew that it would be a line at 1 would be going across so that you could see that that's where the midline is. And it would be up 2 from the midline and go down to the midline. So our max would be 3 and our min would be -1. So when we come over here to graph it, we put a little scale on our graph. Halfway up should be 2. Oops, let's change out of highlighter mode. Halfway up would be 2, and then we have 3 and 1. Halfway down would be 2, and then we have 3 and 1. And we just said that we would want our midline to be around 1. Our max is at 3. And so this would be 90, 180, halfway across, 270, 3/4 of the way, and then 360. That's the 4 key spots. So we start at 0 up here. 90, you're going to be at the midline. 180, you'll be at the minimum. 210, you'll be back to the midline, and at 360, you'll be back up to the max. So you sketch that. And then the question said, graphically solve the equation. So where is it equal to 0? And so equal to 0, it's where it's crossing the x-axis, and it's in those two locations. So let's hop back to the calculator. And we need to do some interpretation and figure out where does it cross the x-axis. So we're going to hit menu, and we are going to go to analyze the graph, and a 0, because we want the equation to be equal to 0, is what we're looking for. So click on 0, which is choice 1, and it's a little bit harder on your calculator than it is on my computer. But you want to be the left of the leftmost zero, and then you want to pick a area that goes to the right of it. And you see that it crosses at 120 degrees. So we're going to go back here and label our point 120, comma 0. And now we have to find this other spot over here. So let's go take a look and repeat the process, which is menu, analyze graph, 0. We want to be on the left side of our 0, and then we want to be on the right side of the 0. And you see it gives us a coordinate of 240, comma 0. And we're going to label that on our graph. Now, the question asks us for the values of x. They don't care about y. So you just have to answer in terms of x. So write x equals 120 degrees and 240 degrees. Now, there's a little bit more work to be done here. Solving graphically means that you need to also label your equations. So if you're one of those people who forget, you need to go back and do that. So you have to have y equals 2 cosine of x plus 1. And if you didn't have the coordinates labeled, you would have to label this as the line y equals 0. But having our coordinates is just as easy. Okay, so these are most useful solving equations when they're most difficult and it doesn't require you to do it algebraically. So if we're looking at this equation here, 15 cosine squared x minus sine cosine x minus 2 equals 0 for all values of x. We should go to our graphing calculator again, go to a new graph, which I already brought up for us, bring up the equation bar, and I've already forgotten the equation. And let me see, 15 cosine squared x. Now when you type this in, it's not going to be so easy. So remember, it's 15. And then you have to tell it to do cosine squared. Your calculator doesn't know about the fancy shortcut. So you've got to do cosine of x, and then you've got to square it. Okay, your calculator doesn't know about the shortcut of humankind of putting the 2 here. You need to do it the other way. So then minus 7 cosine x, and finally minus 2. And then we have to set the scale again. Now 15 is our amplitude and negative 2 is our midline. So if you remember how to figure out how high up it's going to go negative 2 plus 15. So it's going to go up to 13. And then it's going to go from negative 2 down to negative 17. Negative 2 minus 15 is negative 17. So when we adjust our window, we want to make sure we're going to fit that. And if you remember the x, if it's in front of you, it's going from 0 to 360. You want to count it by whatever. Let's put 45. And the minimum should be negative 20, and you can make the max positive 20 if you'd like. And let's count by 1 so I can see everything. Click OK, and then click Enter. Oh, it says I'm missing a parenthesis. Where on earth am I missing the parenthesis? Oh, I probably did not use cosine of x. And here we go. This is what this graph looks like. You see it's peaked up here, then it's crazy looking. It's got a big peak and then a small peak and then a big peak and a small peak. Now we need to figure out where does this cross the x-axis. And the directions were to the nearest tenth. So you need to graph this. So you can get a table of values if you'd like, so you can get an idea, or you could just kind of sketch it so that it looks like it looks over here. I'm going to try to minimize this a little bit so I can see it as I sketch it. Actually, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to copy and paste it. So, if it lets me. Oh, it's not going to let me. You guys lucked out. You're going to have to watch me make it too. So when we graph this, it's going to go like this. It goes down, comes way back up. It goes back down again, and then back like this. Okay, so there's my graph, and it wants to know where does it cross the x-axis to the nearest tenth of a degree. And we're going to do this by doing the 0 button, so analyze graph, 0. We go to left of the first one and then the right, and it tells us 48.2. It's already rounded for us. So the first one is 48.2 degrees. Now if you notice, my scaling and nothing is done correctly on this graph. You need to make sure yours looks much better than mine. Then I've got to do this again for the next. So we repeat the process for all of them. So from here to here, and then I'm going to do it again. So that was 102.0. From here to here, 258. Oh, you know what? These aren't going far enough. So if that happens on the Regents exam and you don't have enough digits, this is a settings issue. So you go up to settings, document settings, and instead of floating 6, you're not even going to tell it to float at all. You're going to say fix it to 12. It means every single time it's going to give you 12 answers as your output, hopefully. And as I grab this one, we want it to be from here to here, it should give me my results. Oh, maybe it didn't do it this time. You can also just make it float normal or float 8 and it will show more than you are here. All right, so I have 102, 258, and 312 as my answers. And so those are the answers to the questions. And you just need to make sure that you scale, graph, and label your equation. So you need to have a scale, you need to have scale on X and Y, and you need to label, and you need to identify your answers. I'm going to pause the recording, and I'm going to do the graphs that are on the back, and then you can see if your graphs match mine. This is mostly because you will not have a graphing calculator, and I'm just going to put these up for you to check. These should be checked after you've done them in class with a graphing calculator, so you don't need to check them right now for your homework, although they will be at the end of the video around the 12-minute 45-second mark. And we'll pause here. Okay, so in the first one, you set your window from -10 to 10 and 0 to 360. Type in the equation and solve for both of these. Now, we'll show you quickly that I did figure out how to expand those decimals while I was paused. Even though it seems like no time for you, I learned a lot. If you go to menu and you go to settings again, that display the digits. If you set it to auto, you'll see many, many more digits than when it was fixed to 3, I believe, in the graph. So if you change this to auto instead of fixed 3, you will see a lot more digits in your equations. Okay, now getting back over to here, when you finish this, you get 131.8 and 228.2 degrees. In exercise 4, you type it in exactly as you see it. As you see what I typed in the pink. Except you always have to make sure you use x's when graphing. I did not emphasize that enough before. Do not change to the fancy variable of the problem. Make sure you always graph in terms of x. If you notice, there are 4 places where it crosses the x-axis, so there are 4 zeros, 9.6, 90, 170.4, and 270. In the last one, you notice that they all cross right around. They don't really seem to be doing much except crossing very carefully. There are 3 zeros to this, 210, 270, and 330. And they just say some graphing windows can be a challenge and might require multiple adjustments. This is especially true if you're working with an older 83 or 84. The Unspire doesn't really apply to. This concludes the video on graphing. Ask lots of questions in class about this. One more video to go for this unit.